Have you ever wondered, why do some artists do so much better than others? Well, as you watch me draw this, learn the best art habits and mindsets that are gonna help you stand out, as well as strategies to help you do better and go much faster. And once you do these, people wonder why you're doing so much better. Now, since you're somebody who really wants to do so much better, you want to succeed with your artwork, and you've got great dreams that I want to help you accomplish, friend, it's really important that you understand this. There are 3 seasons that all artists go through, and it's very important to identify at the start when you're wanting to ascend, when you're wanting to succeed, which season are you currently in? So the first season is what I call the crawl, and this is when you're typically just starting out, you're in that beginner novice phase, you're pretty green to it, you're trying lots of things, you're experimenting with lots of things, you've got a lot of enthusiasm for this. And you don't exactly know 100% what you're doing, but you're doing so much of it and you're trying a lot of different things, and that's really great. But then this also brings in some particular issues that we're going to talk about today. And then you will eventually graduate into the hustler phase. And this is when you have started to get some type of a foothold. You've started to gain some momentum. You've started to gain some consistency in whatever you're doing. And this can take multiple different forms for whatever you're interested in doing. Maybe it's you finally got some commissions. Maybe it's that your career is taking off. Maybe you finally got a job in art. Maybe that's even just a part-time job too. Maybe it's just that you finally kind of get a feel for what you like to do and what you would like to do. But when you're in the hustler phase, this is the middle zone where honestly, it just feels like there's so much more that you always have to do. Are you feeling like that right now? And as we go through this video, I'm also going to talk to you about how you kind of ascend to the next level here, which is when you hit what I call the post season of success. And this is when you are granted some level of comfort. This is when you can actually sit back and you can think about what you have done and what you need to do. And this is also what grants you a lot of wisdom when it's done right, so that you can actually understand where do you have to go and what do you have to do better, to grow in your career, to grow in your influence, and to grow overall as your artistic skill does too. And now this is really crucial to our conversation because as we're going to learn about what you need to do and why some artists do better than others, you need to understand which one of these 3 seasons are you a part of. So tell me down below which one you're in, because I'm going to be addressing all 3 of them as we go through all of these today. Let's start with this. Now I got a big question for you. And as you're trying to identify what you're doing versus what somebody else is doing and why are they doing better and you're not, I have one simple question I'd like to boil this down to. Is art a priority for you? Because if art is a priority for you, we need to treat it as such. And one of the biggest reasons that I identify why some artists do exponentially better than others is that they treat it like it is something that is a necessity, like it is them going to work, like it is them taking care of their families, like it is them earning their money however they're doing it, is that they are going to treat it like it's something that they have to do. And this contrasts with you just working on whims. And what I tend to see a lot is artists that are in the crawl phase is that they tend to work on a lot of whims. And they'll be like, well, I kind of feel like it now, I feel like it then, I don't feel like it now, and I don't feel like it then. And that's kind of what promotes them to get caught up in this trap, which I think the hustler also gets caught up in sometimes, which is you're typically searching for what's called motivation. Are you one of these people too? Are you constantly like trying to just grab a hold of that motivation? And sometimes you sit down and you're just like, nope, not today. Well, that's where I want to just put this to bed and teach you what people in the next level know that you can start to do right now. If you really want art to be a priority for you, if you really do want this, friend, what you have to do is you have to schedule in time. And just think about it like this. You schedule your doctor's appointments, you schedule for work, you schedule for your commute, you schedule for everything that you hate in life. You got to schedule time for art. And what I mean by that is no, I'm not saying you need to do art every single day, okay? Just realistically, I don't do art every single day. I do a lot of things. I work about 20 hours a week for my business outside of my normal job. But I think that you can easily set this up in a really simple way. Just look at it in terms of a week, okay? Now, if you're somebody who's in a postseason of success where you already gained your foothold and you have some level of comfort, then you have that too. But one of the things that I want to say is that once you've hit a postseason or when you're in that hustler zone, you're starting to gain a little comfort, you're going to convince yourself why you don't have to do this anymore. But I want to just bring it back. So if you just take a look at this really simplistically, how much time do you want to dedicate to your artwork every single week? Is it 5 hours? Is it 10 hours? Is it 40 hours, whatever it is, okay? Like if you're somebody who's unemployed, the number one piece of advice that I'm always giving to people in that sphere is if you're not going to treat art like it is a full-time job for you, and you're currently not doing anything else, then it's never going to be. So if you want it to eventually be something that is going to be more substantial, then I would urge you to consider this, friend. Treat it like it is more substantial right now, not in 5 years from now. And then this also brings into a topic that I think a lot of new and middle artists don't quite understand or they misperceive, which is that, well, if I create a schedule for myself and I lock myself into, I have to do this many hours, oh my God, it's gonna be so stressful and I'm not gonna have any freedom. But the way I wanna reframe this for you, friend, really simplistically is just like this. You scheduling time for yourself is not going to take away freedom, it is going to gift you freedom because it's going to gift you power, because this will gift you the ability to have not only freedom to actually pursue the things that you want, but freedom for you to be more creative, freedom for you to let your thoughts flow, freedom for you to actually sit down and produce the things that you want. And that's not going to happen for you until you sit down and you actually schedule it. So let me know, how many hours do you want to produce artwork for every single week? And by the way, if you're somebody who's waiting for the best time, you're waiting for the best motivation, you're waiting for the perfect moment, by the time that perfect moment comes, y'all, it's going to be too late because you will actually create, according to psychology, motivation by you actually starting the project, not waiting for motivation to start the project. Because you actually starting the thing, you actually doing the work is going to create the best circumstances for you to create, not waiting for it to come first. See how that works? Now let's talk about a big major difference that's gonna happen between all three of those levels. And it's gonna happen throughout your entire process, okay? So while you're generally working, obviously you're gonna hit some snags, you're gonna hit some difficulties. And do you ever become paralyzed when you're in the middle of your process and you're like, man, this just isn't working out for me, or like, man, that looks terrible right there? Or do you ever become just completely paralyzed and think, why is this not happening? Well, the biggest difference between artists that are in the beginning phases, the middle phases, and then the final phase is the quality of your questions. Because if you've never heard this, friend, I want to let you know, the questions that you ask yourself are going to net you the exact result that you want and you deserve. So just to give you an example here, so what I tend to see with artists that are in the first season when they're in the crawl is that they're typically pretty self-deprecating. They're gonna say things like, why am I not good enough? Why do I not get this? This doesn't make sense to me. Why does mine suck? Okay? Well, when you're gonna ask questions like that, you're gonna directly get answers that support it. You're gonna be like, well, I suck because I'm not good enough. I suck because I don't have the skill. I suck because I'm too old or I'm too young. You're gonna say, I suck because I don't have talent. And we're gonna talk about that later, by the way, because it doesn't matter. And so if you get caught up in this negative loop where you're gonna be asking really lousy questions for yourself, you're gonna get really lousy answers to support it. And you're gonna get really lousy answers that are gonna reinforce why you shouldn't be doing this, or your mom or your dad were right, or your brother was right, or your friends were right for laughing at your artwork at some point, and that you shouldn't be an artist. So you can't do that though, Fred. And then when you get to the hustler phase, when you get to that middle zone, then you're gonna start to ask yourself a similar set of questions, but you're gonna insert more comparison. Is this you, by the way? Do you have a lot of trouble comparing your artwork versus your peers or with other people online? Because I know that's a really nasty habit a lot of artists have, and I bet you do too. So when you're in that zone, you're gonna ask yourself, well, why are they so much better? Or why do they get so much more likes or comments or views on their stuff? Why do they have a job and I don't have a job? And again, when you're asking yourself those low quality questions, you're gonna find answers to them that are very low quality. You're gonna be like, well, they must be better than me. They must be more gifted than me. They must be smarter than me. They must have been luckier than me. Or maybe you've looked at the artist account and been like, well, they're just way more attractive than me, or like they're doing a fandom that's bigger than me. And when you start to ask yourself those questions again, they're worthless. They don't matter. And actually what you're doing is you're reinforcing why you should quit and why you should pump the brakes. And that's not gonna help you, friend. Now, if you want to be more successful, and once you've hit that postseason of success, you're going to get a lot more intentional with them. So the difference is when you're going to ask yourself quality questions, it's going to look like this. What do I need to do in this piece? That doesn't look right. What do I need to improve in it? How can I improve that? That's interesting how that artist does that. Let me analyze, how do they do that? So if you're not picking up on this, let me just make this really explicit. You're gonna ask yourself really targeted questions so that you can directly take an action directly after that, okay? You're not gonna ask yourself a question that's gonna limit you into thinking about why you're not worth it. And we'll talk about that later too, because that's a big topic as well. But if you ask yourself really quality questions, you're gonna get really quality answers. If you ask yourself really low quality questions, you're gonna have a lot of permission to fail. And do you really wanna do that? Because I bet you don't. Now, this next topic is a doozy. It's something that I'm really passionate about, and it's something that I tend to notice a lot of artists at all levels tend to really over-obsess with. So let me ask you this. Do you think that you're talented, or do you maybe concern yourself that you're not talented enough? Well, listen, I just want to put this to bed for you right now and really explain how different artists at different points think about this concept. When you're in the beginning, you might not think about talent too much, but you're gonna run into that wall called talent where you're gonna think that you don't have enough, you weren't born special enough, and you didn't have the training, or maybe that you're not smart enough. When you get to the middle phase, you might have graduated into that and you're in that hustler phase and you're just like, okay, well, I've hit this wall, but I can't proceed forward because I'm not talented. However, though, once you hit the next phase on this, you're gonna realize that nobody cares. Like literally nobody cares about this thing called talent. And to that point, I just want to say this. Okay, so you think that you were born special, you think that you were born better than everybody else? Great, good for you. Nobody cares, and it doesn't matter to you. And I want to be really specific on this because talent tends to have a very amorphous definition, and I just want to set this forth right now. Talent means that you are born better, more superior than everybody else. And what I tend to notice over the years is that people tend to make up their own definition for this one, and if it's that fluid, then you're just disqualifying it as a concept altogether. And so therefore, if you can't define it, then it doesn't exist. It disproves the entire notion altogether. And what I want to let you know from my experiences, friend, is that if you're worried about, especially if you're younger in life right now, and you're worried about somebody who you know or somebody that you see online that is just like killing it and they're just slaying through everything that they do and everything they do is amazing and brilliant, I want to let you know this. In my experiences of literally teaching thousands of artists in my career, what you'll find is that the brightest stars often burn the brightest, but they burn out the fastest. And I've seen so many artists that were really killing it for so long, and then they just stopped altogether. And then they just flatlined. And then they just burnt out. And then they never made art again. And typically what you'll find is that most people stop doing art 5 to 10 years, either after they graduate from a program or once they get into an art profession. So for you as an artist, like you don't have to worry about whether or not you were born equipped with this or not. It doesn't matter. The other thing I want to let you know is if you're overly obsessed and concerned about this topic, there's no proof of it. There's literally none. There's no test, there's no evaluation system, there's nothing that actually proves. There's no gene that exists for this whatsoever. Now, I know where you're gonna go with this, and you're gonna say, well, yes, some people are born with certain advantages, or some people are born with greater IQs. Okay, well, unless you have some severe mobility or vision impairment, you're born equipped with everything you need to be a superior and amazing artist, like you probably will if you just stick with it. And if you're gonna try and group it into intelligence, what I'll let you know is that there's absolutely no correlation between intelligence as an IQ and artistic ability. It just doesn't happen. And then artists that are in a later season of life know this very clearly. It's not what you were born with or what you think that you have as an advantage. It's what you do. And if you really dissect the people that have been the greatest performers over the history of mankind in any artistic field, you're gonna find that they are just the accumulation of really mundane, simple, boring habits that you could do too. If you take a look at, yes, Mozart or Picasso, if you were born into somebody who was a world-class artist in their own right, and you were brought up with that since a very young age, and you had thousands of hours of practice, you would be like that too. And so what artists know in their later season of life is that it just doesn't matter. It's what you do with your artistry, not what you come into artistry with. How's that sound? And if you want to see an entire video on this topic, please let me know, because if you can't tell, I'm really deeply passionate about this. And this is actually the topic of my dissertation that I'm currently in my doctorate program for. Now, here's a big, awesome tip that I've learned, and I actually acquired this from watching Dragon Ball Z, and I want to let you know how you can actually improve in your artistry in your downtime when you're not making art. And no, I'm not going to tell you about taking breaks or taking extra naps or anything. I want to tell you real practical advice. Now, I grew up watching Dragon Ball Z, and in that, I remember so many times two people in the show would just be sitting and meditating next to each other, and they participated in this practice of what's called image training. And this is something that Dragon Ball Z implemented that actually real martial artists do and people in other fields do as well. What image training does for you is it allows you to actually put yourself into a place, put yourself into whatever moment that's real or not real, and you can actually start to think about all the decisions, and you can actually evaluate how everything would go. And just to put this into my own practice here, when I'm not making artwork, when I'm at work, or when I'm just bored sitting around, what I tend to do for myself, and as a really great practice, I'll kind of relate this back to what you can do at whatever season of life you're in right now, is I'll often just think about all of the decisions and all the places in my artwork that I need to work on. So I'll kind of think about, okay, I need to go ahead and make that face. I want to make that face look like this. I want to use this color scheme. I want to go ahead and I want to make sure I balance this and this. I want to go ahead and I want to create this type of a mood. I want to use this type of a perspective. I need to fix that. How do I do that? And I start to ask myself again those quality questions. So for you in whatever season of art life you're in right now, here's what you can do. First off, if you're somebody who's in a very initial season, okay, my friend, what you need to do is actually learn how to train your image brain. And to do that, you have to get references. And to give you a really good practice for that, if you're not working with 10 to 20 references on whatever artwork you're working on, since you are definitely new to this and you're beginning and you're learning, then you're not training your image brain enough because you're working on what are called schemas, which are what your brain's vision of what it thinks something looks like, not what it does look like or what you want it to look like, okay? And that's gonna hold you back majorly until you embrace that. And then what you can also start to do is, what I do is I put all of my stuff on either a PureRef document or I put it on my Dropbox and I look at that just when I'm bored, when nothing's happening around me, or when I just want to be certain across it. And I like it on Dropbox a lot. I'm not sponsored by them or anything, because then I can shift between both my artwork and my references and I'll know what to do when I do sit down to do it. If you're somebody that's in the hustler zone, then this is definitely something that you can definitely start to do because you're going to have more tactical knowledge. You're going to think, okay, what type of brush do I use? How do I create that texture? How do I make the rendering on this look better? How do I make that lighting look better? What type of colors, what type of tools, what type of gradient maps should I use? You can start to think through all of those decisions so that when you sit down, boom, you are powerhouse and you are ready to go. If you're somebody that's in the postseason of success, all of this comes together beautifully because you can think about, okay, that was really hard for me to do. What references do I need to get from it? What models do I need to get from it? What models do I need to create for it? Do I need to create some type of a model myself? Do I need to create some type of diorama? Do I need to light something myself? So you can use image training so that you can inform your process before you even sit down to do it. How powerful would that be for you? Because this is something that I see so many artists not doing that will enable you to go faster, to go harder, and to get better results. Wouldn't you love that? Now, a top part of being an artist is that the entire world is flooded with so many opinions. What you'll find is that a lot of people's opinions you probably shouldn't listen to, okay? When you take a look at people that are especially not in the art industry, not in artistic fields, or just overall people that don't appreciate art at all, they have worthless opinions for you. And I'm just gonna relate this back to myself. Like, I literally grew up with everybody around me telling me that art would never be a career choice, I would never make money from it, I should go into something more realistic. Have you ever been gifted that? And then once I got into all of this, I proved them wrong. And so what I tend to see too is that depending on what season that you're in, you might be also asking advice from the wrong set of people, okay? So listen, when you're initially in the crawl phase, you should be taking in whatever advice you can get, because listen, some advice is gonna stick. Some advice you're gonna learn like, that doesn't really work for me. Or you're gonna somehow create an amalgamation of different advices and be like, oh, that's the way. And that will graduate you to the next step. When you're in the hustler phase, then I'm gonna tell you that what you need to do is you need to always seek advice from people that are better than you. And this is something that I started to do when I was in that season, and before I even had a term for that season of it, is I would typically go to websites, I would go to communities that were flooded with artists that were so much better than me in industries that I wanted to be a part of or I was potentially interested in, and I would invite you to do that too. And then once you're in that postseason of success, then you want to work with your peers, you want to work with people that inspire you. You also want to take a look at people that are maybe younger than you too, or much older than you, and kind of influence yourself by being around them. And listen, if you're not sure like what communities to go to, there are so many great ones online, great Discord communities, Facebook groups. There's lots of places that you can go. And if you want a really great Discord community, by the way, let me just go ahead and plug mine, because mine's right there down below in the description. I would love for you to be a part of it. Totally free to join up on there too. And hey, if this video is helping you, my friend, in getting to the next level, please hit that like and subscribe, because I come at you every single week with practical advice and tips just like this to help you be the artist that you want to. And hey, look, maybe you've been trying this for a while and you know this stuff already, but you just can't implement it. And that's where my one-on-one art mentorship comes into play. Listen, this is not a course, it's not a class, it's me and you working one-on-one to accomplish the things that you want to do at the pace you want to do it. I've helped people just like you totally supercharge their art business and be able to achieve everything that they didn't think they'd be able to do for years in a matter of months. And if that sounds like you, then go ahead and check out the link in my description, fill out the form, and I'll reach out to you soon. And now that brings us into the next tip to help you grow into the artist that you want to be. Now I want to tell you about a really big toxic practice that I see from artists of really all levels, and why it's so difficult for you to grow. Because one thing I've learned over my years is that just like you can't eat from an untended garden, an artist can't grow from an untended mindset as well. And what I find is that a lot of artists incarcerate themselves voluntarily through the stories that they tell themselves, okay? So when you're in the initial crawl phase, what you're gonna find is that most artists tend to tell themselves self-deprecating stories. And again, they're gonna work on whims, they're gonna be like, maybe this is possible, maybe it's not. And what they're kind of doing is they're focusing on just having fun with it, but they're also secretly telling themselves why they can't succeed, why they won't make it, and why people that look like them, that sound like them, that are from the socioeconomic status as them, aren't going to succeed. And then once you graduate into the middle phase, you're going to start to tell yourself, okay, well, I can only hit this wall, I can only get paid so much, I can only make so much from commissions because I live in this country, because I look like this, because nobody else around me does that, because I have to be realistic, because I live in this country, because the economy is this and that. And these are all related to this big issue of having a fixed mindset. Because I want to let you know, friend, there are people that are in way more dire circumstances than you that are killing it, and they're killing it more than you. And it's strictly because of the fact that they have what is called instead a growth mindset. And you have to identify where your growth mindsets exist and where your fixed mindsets exist. Because the most toxic trait that any artist can have is that regardless of what you tell yourself, you can or you can't do it, you're always right. And you will always find supporting evidence for whichever side of the fence you want to sit on. Have you ever considered that? Because as artists, we tend to live in prisons that we construct out of our own limiting beliefs. And if you are somebody that wants to really succeed with this, I want to let you know, art is never going away. Art has always been a foundational part of society. Art has always been something that's driven humanity and innovations forward, and you can be a part of that. But if you tell yourself right now that you can't, or that your skill is never going to grow, or that you're never going to be able to get that job, then you know what? You're right. And at the end of the day, you're not actually believing that, you're just telling yourself that. And stories that you tell yourself are either gonna be the power for you to excel or to quit. Which one is it for you? Now let's come to a big foundational reality here, y'all. As an artist, we've all got skills that we want to improve, right? And we've all got things that we need to work on. This is typically wrapped in this really weird, kind of ambiguous topic of what's called foundations. Has anyone ever told you that you need to work on your foundations? I'm going to tell you this, I friggin' hate that. Whenever somebody says to you, you need to work on your foundations, it's almost like the most thoughtless thing that anybody could ever tell you. It's almost like you need to work on being a better human. What the heck does that mean? So I want to put this into a more concrete definition for you, okay? When you're working on yourself as an artist and you got to grow your skills, let's just switch that term foundations to skills, okay? Here's one of the big things I want to let you in on, is that you need to focus on how you are working on skills that you really like versus the skills you need to know and you're avoiding. So let's take a look at it like this. If you're somebody who's in the crawl phase, then you're typically only working on things that you really like. You're like, I really like anime, and I really like to do lines, and I really like to color like this, and I really like cell shading, and I really like to make things my own way, whatever that means. And when you're doing that, you're also wholly avoiding everything that's actually gonna make you better. And listen, I used to be an anime artist. Like, believe it or not, like I used to only do that stuff. And obviously, as you can tell from this artwork, that's not my jam anymore. But that's where I did come from. And then I learned when I got to the middle phase, you need to start to focus on implementing a little bit more of that. And then once you get into the postseason of success, you need to, again, really hammer out all of those skills that you are avoiding. And the best strategy I can suggest for you right now is simply this. Just go ahead and sprinkle in those things that you don't like with the things that you do like. And here's a split. If you're in the crawl phase, I would say that you want to work on roughly 70% everything that you love and 30% of everything that you avoid. When you're in the middle phase, when you're in that hustler zone, you want to work at a little bit more, 60-40. And then when you're in the postseason of success, like honestly, it should be like 30% focusing on what you like and then using the other 70% to actually implement specific challenges for yourself. Every single time that you make an artwork, you're gonna work on one of those foundations. So I know that people really are very ambiguous and unspecific about this, but tell me, does that help to shape your practices a little bit better and a little bit more concretely? Because I hope so. All right, now it's come the time for us to have some tough love here. And I'm gonna talk to you about a topic that I'm gonna tell you is literally gonna help you propel yourself to the future that you want or hold yourself back. And we're gonna talk about now, how often are you not finishing anything? Like, are you somebody who's a chronic unfinisher? Tell me about it down below if that's something that you personally struggle with, because I see this all the time. And one of the big things that I tend to notice is that artists who are at different phases approach quitting their artworks at different phases and for different reasons. So typically, if you're somebody who's in the crawl, the second that you don't like it, or you say this magical phrase, you're gonna be like, I'm done. That's typically when you quit it. But however, though, what I tend to notice is this is also the most uninformed phase. This is also when you're not really sure of like what's good or what's bad, and especially how to fix it. So oftentimes, though, what I want to let you know is that once you hit that wall, that's when the real learning occurs. And there are so many artists in the crawl phase that just work towards that wall and then they just stop. And you're preventing yourself from growing. And then similarly, when you're in the middle hustler phase, again, you're gonna work towards, let's just define this a little bit better. It's your comfort zone. You're gonna be like, well, I worked here, boom, done. And you need to think about, how do I push myself more? What do I need to do a little bit more? Again, maybe you need to go to those communities. You need to get some feedback. You need to go ahead and ask some other people, or you need to look up a tutorial. You need to take a look at, okay, well, how do I emphasize this? How do I make that mood a little bit better? How do I spice up this artwork? What's my learning objective in here too? And we'll talk about that in a second. So if you're in that middle phase, I wanna tell you, your ability and your willingness to quit early is really making you not succeed to the level that you want to. And so one of the best things I want to let everybody know here that's in the first two phases is real simple. If you're in the beginner zone phase, when you think that you're done and when you think that something's not working, just work on it for 2 more hours, okay? If you're in the middle zone, when you're in that hustler zone, you have some level of comfort, I want to tell you this. When you say that you're done, when you think that you put your all into it, work on it for just 1 more hour, okay? And then when you graduate into that third season, then you're gonna be gifted with this knowledge. Your artwork isn't complete until you accomplish exactly what you set out for. So like one of the things that I always recommend for people in my mentorship, and one of the things I set out with them every single time that we take a look at another artwork when they start another project, is that we'll define very specific objectives, like what's the mood, what's the focus, what do you wanna emphasize here, what do you wanna communicate here, what's the story here? And you're done when you hit those targets. Otherwise, what I tend to notice from people in the first two phases is that you're shooting blind. You're like, I hope that I hit something, but you're probably not, right? There you go. You need to hit a target or else you're just shooting blind, friend. Have you ever considered that? All right, so how about I let you in on a big secret that honestly, I don't hear any other art YouTubers talk about, but I really do, because it's one of the things that will majorly help you succeed as an artist in whatever field and whatever practice, whatever habit you want to graduate into. It's gonna come down to this. We talked a little bit about your mindset, but one of the biggest things I want to let you know is that oftentimes when you're looking at somebody else, and this is especially hard for people that are caught in this comparison trap, so hear me out. You're going to take a look at somebody's product. You're going to take a look at them as a product. You're going to take a look at them as a success. And you're going to want that. And you're going to be like, man, I can't wait till I get that. I can't wait till I get there. I can't wait until I do this. And I'm not going to be happy until I get there. I'm not going to be happy until I achieve this. I'm not going to be happy until I get those views. I'm not going to be happy until I have that follower base, right? Are you somebody thinking like this? because I want to let you know that you're literally dooming yourself. And one of the best ways I've ever had this really succinctly kind of framed is just as such. You have a problem with desire. And desire, as I've heard this quoted before, is that desire is a contract that you make with yourself to be miserable until you achieve or get the thing that you want. So you can't drag out your success. You can't drag out waiting your happiness until you hit that thing. You have to learn how to enjoy it along the way. People often use this term of like, love the journey. But oftentimes, like, I'm just gonna be real with you, like the journey sucks sometimes, okay? But you do have to kind of figure out how do you get there. And how you get there is honestly from this major point I wanna make. You have to shift and evolve what you're doing in order to get there. Because back to what I said earlier, people want the end product, but they don't want to get the result by doing the same exact thing through the labor of them. So oftentimes you'll take a look at a pro artist or somebody that you love or you look up to, right? And you'll be like, man, I would do anything to be like them, but I'm gonna sit down and play 100 hours of video games over the next 3 months. That's why you're not doing it, okay? And what I tend to find that a lot of artists get wrapped up into is this kind of nasty, toxic cycle of wanting their cake and eating it too. They want to be that artist, but they're not willing to sacrifice a little bit so that they can. And I used to be like this too. And I used to go ahead and I used to covet these people. And I really used to like glorify them and be like, man, I would do anything for that. And then I would do everything to avoid doing it. And there's a lot of artists that I talk to, that I see online, and you'll probably hear this too. You ever hear this, Jem, where people will be like, well, easier said than done, because saying something takes nothing. It involves no risk, and you have literally no failure in that, and it takes nothing for you. And the reason why is because you need to really work on yourself. You need to change what you're doing. You need to adopt different practices. You need to try out new things, because right now, your current level of success is directly proportionate to what you are currently doing. And if you're not willing to do more or do different, then don't expect to get anything different, because my friend, I just want to let you in on this. Life won't change until you do. And one of the most sorely missed points I would love to make for you right now is just this. You cannot separate the art from the artist. You will oftentimes be tricked into thinking that you just need a major skill set or something to be more successful, but that's not true. So what do you think you need to do differently? And what new habits, mindsets, or practices do you need to do? And this also just relates to not only your art practices, but yourself as a human being. Consider that, would you? Now, in creating any artwork, one of the most exhausting things that we have to do is we have to make so many decisions. You have to have a direction, you have to have a vision, you have to have inspiration. You have to have that. And that eventually evolves into what's called decision fatigue, where you're just overwhelmed and you're just exhausted because you have to do all of these things and you have to resolve the fact that this doesn't look good and that looks okay, but I need to make this other thing look good. Or this character looks great. Why does this character look like crap? And then that entangles itself into this concern that I see with artists at different levels. So when you're in that initial phase, you are making decisions off of what you think looks good or what you wish looked good. And then oftentimes you kind of find like it doesn't look good, or it doesn't look as good as you want, or it still looks flawed, right? And then when you're in the middle phase, you're trying to make decisions and then you're doubting your decisions because it's not the same decisions that made somebody's artwork look as good as theirs. And so then therefore, you're really caught up in this nasty cycle of you doubting your decisions. But then when you graduate into the next level, what happens is this. You just learn that there's no wrong decision, my friend, okay? And if you want to get better, you have to just be okay with just committing to decisions, okay? And this builds itself into what's called trust. You have to trust what you're doing. You have to trust that your action is going to result in some version that's going to be acceptable for you. For us as artists, we need to constantly work ourselves into building more trust with ourselves, okay? And that evolves itself into what's called confidence. You see where I'm going with this one here? For you who's afraid to make a decision, for you who's afraid that your artwork's gonna come out poorly, for you who's afraid that you're not gonna make it, for you who's afraid that you're doing the wrong thing, you're applying the wrong practice, okay? Let me just gift you with this knowledge. There's no such thing as a wrong decision. The only wrong decision is inaction. As long as you're taking action, you're going to eventually get to a point where you either do it really good or you know, because you're wise about it now, that that's not a good practice for you, okay? And both of those are incredibly valuable for you, because I think I've gone through every single bad practice that I can think of, especially when it comes to like freelancing. I'll just use that as an example. I used to do everything wrong that I now try and inform you, like, please don't do this stuff. And it's the same way with your artwork. And the way that you're gonna get there is just committing to whatever you're doing, just do it and see how it comes out, and then commit to a new decision. And a lot of times too, this will involve you making big decisions that will globally shape your artwork much differently. Like it might be like, just as an example here, do you ever like see something that is just horribly flawed in your artwork and you just dance around it? You're like, I hope everybody just looks at this other stuff and not that thing. Well, that doesn't tend to work out for you, because again, you're afraid to make the decision to just like slice and dice up that character and put it back together. And I do this all the time in my artwork too. So let me ask you this. What level of trust do you currently have in yourself and your decision-making process? And what do you think you need to do better? And now I bet at this point in time, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, I need to go so much faster. Are you somebody like this? I tend to notice though, a lot of artists are worried about speed way too early in their career. And they're worried about it way before they attain proficiency. And you're gonna see artists that are doing speed paints. You're gonna see artists that just whip out something in like a mere fraction of the time that you would do it too. And I've concerned myself with that too. I used to follow all this practice to like make you better, make you faster, make you be more like this. But then I learned some really concrete things that are actually gonna make you faster and deliver you a better product. And to explain all that, I made this video right here for you, so go ahead, check it out. And if this helped you, share it with somebody that you know. Thanks so much, and see you next time.